Imagine a world where everything we've ever known about life is a lie, where the boundaries between truth and myth blur under the cold light of the unknown. For decades, governments have denied it, scientists have debated it, and witnesses have been silenced. But deep in the forgotten corners of our world, something extraordinary, something terrifying, has been happening. This isn't just a story about UFOs or strange lights in the sky. This is about real people, real fear, and a mystery so profound that it challenges our very existence. Tonight, we open the classified files of one of the most chilling alien incidents ever recorded, a case so disturbing that it was buried under decades of denial. Welcome to the untold story of the Solway Firth Alien Incident, the real mystery that still haunts humanity's search for truth. It was May 23, 1964, an ordinary Sunday afternoon in Cumbria, England. A man named Jim Templeton, a quiet fireman and photographer, decided to take his wife and young daughter for a picnic near the Solway Firth marshes. The air was cool, the sky painted with soft silver clouds and not a soul in sight. Jim set up his camera, an old Zeiss Contaflex, and took a few simple photos of his daughter sitting in the grass, smiling innocently at the camera. Nothing unusual, nothing strange, just another moment of family joy. But when the film was developed, Jim froze in horror. Behind his daughter stood a figure, a tall, white-clad being that wasn't there when the photo was taken. It had a strange helmet-like head, no visible eyes, and a posture far too rigid, too unnatural to be human. The figure appeared to be floating slightly above the ground, glowing faintly under the sunlight, as if it didn't belong to this world. The moment he saw it, Jim's heart began to pound. He knew he had captured something he shouldn't have. At first, he thought it might have been a trick of light, perhaps a reflection, a double exposure. But the local photo experts confirmed the negative was real. There was no sign of tampering, no double imaging, no editing. Whatever that figure was, it was physically present in the frame. That single photograph would soon send shockwaves through the world. Newspapers exploded with headlines calling it the Solway spaceman. Scientists argued, skeptics mocked, but no one could explain the impossible. Then something even stranger happened. A few days later, while Jim was at work, two men in dark suits arrived at his fire station. They introduced themselves as government officials, flashing badges with no names. They told Jim they needed to talk about his photograph, in private. Their car was black, their manner calm but unnervingly firm. They referred to each other only as Number 9 and Number 10. They asked him to take them to the exact spot where the photo was taken. As they stood there in the quiet marshland, the men began asking questions about the weather, about what Jim saw, about whether he noticed any unusual smells or sounds. But then, one of the men turned and asked something chilling. Where did the second being go? Jim froze. He had only ever seen one figure in the photo. The man's expression didn't change. The second man wrote something in a small black notebook. Then, without a word, they walked back to their car. The vehicle drove away and vanished down the empty road. No trace, no record, no names. From that day onward, Jim would never see or hear from them again. That night, Jim couldn't sleep. He replayed every moment in his head, the sound of the shutter click, the way the air had felt heavy that afternoon, and now, the memory of those cold-eyed men. Deep down, he knew the photo wasn't just a coincidence. It was a message, a warning, a window into something far beyond human understanding. What he didn't know was that the same week, hundreds of miles away, another sighting had taken place near a secret military launch site, eerily connected to his photo. And as the stars flickered above his home that night, Jim Templeton whispered to himself, "What if they're already here?" The next morning, the quiet town of Carlisle awoke to chaos. Reporters surrounded Jim's small brick house, flashing cameras, asking endless questions. Did you fake it? Was it a hoax? Did you see the alien in person? But Jim had no answers. His only proof was the haunting image, a mysterious, white-suited figure looming behind his daughter. Even as he tried to convince the world he wasn't lying, he began noticing strange things. His phone would click before every call connected. At night, cars would stop outside his house and leave the moment he stepped out. Someone or something was watching. Days later, things took a darker turn. A letter arrived. No return address, no name, only one line typed in bold capital letters. Burn the negative. The words sent chills down his spine. Jim ignored it at first, but soon his wife began hearing noises in the backyard at night. Footsteps, whispers, even a faint metallic hum. Their daughter started crying in her sleep, muttering strange words she'd never heard before. The light man is coming back. When Jim asked what she meant, she said, "The man in white told me not to be afraid. He's from the sky." That moment broke him. Jim reached out to the police, but the local chief brushed it off as public hysteria. The media's attention was fading, yet the mystery only grew. The Royal Air Force soon contacted Jim, asking permission to inspect the photo. They sent experts who claimed that the figure's posture and attire resembled a high-altitude pressure suit. But how could that be? There were no astronauts in the area, and England's space program was still limited. Someone, or something, had appeared in that frame wearing technology no human had at that time. Then came the connection that changed everything. A week after Jim's photograph went public, a rocket test in Woomera, Australia, was mysteriously aborted. The technicians reported seeing two strange figures in white suits standing near the launch pad, figures that appeared and vanished without a trace. The test commander later saw the photo from Solway Firth and went pale. He told his colleagues, "That's him. That's the same being we saw at Woomera." Both incidents happened within days of each other, half a world apart. As this information leaked, the government tightened its silence. Officials denied any connection between the two events, but Jim's story was now part of something much larger. A network of sightings stretching from Britain to Australia, from the quiet marshes of Cumbria to the hidden deserts of the south. Every thread led to one conclusion. The figure in Jim's photo wasn't human. It was part of a pattern, and that pattern was being carefully erased from history. One evening, while Jim sat alone in his living room, he saw a bright flash outside his window. Silent, intense, blinding. He ran outside expecting lightning, but what he saw made his blood freeze. A metallic object, oval-shaped, hovered low over the field behind his home. It emitted a soft humming sound, not mechanical, but alive. His camera was inside, but his legs refused to move. Then, as silently as it appeared, the craft shot upward into the clouds, disappearing in an instant. The air was left thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something cold, electric, and otherworldly. That night, Jim realized he was no longer a witness. He was part of the story. The Solway spaceman wasn't finished with him. It had just begun. Weeks passed, and Jim Templeton's once peaceful life began to unravel. People who once smiled at him on the street now crossed to the other side. The local newspaper labeled him the hoax photographer, and even his close friends began avoiding him. But the deeper Jim looked into the mystery, the more impossible it became to walk away. Late at night he would sit by his kitchen window staring into the dark horizon where the marsh met the sky, hoping to catch another glimpse of the being that had changed his life. But each time he only found silence, the kind that screams louder than sound. One evening, Jim received an unexpected visitor, a man who claimed to work for the Ministry of Defense. Unlike the earlier two men, this one seemed nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. He introduced himself as Alan, His hands shook as he spoke, his voice a whisper. "Mr. Templeton," he said, "you have no idea what you stumbled into. That thing in your photo, it's not from here. But it's not from up there either." Jim frowned, confused. Alan continued, "They're not aliens in the way you think. They've been here longer than we have, watching, waiting. The government knows. They've known for years." Before Jim could ask another question, Alan stood up suddenly, his eyes darting to the window. "They're listening," he said. "Don't trust the sky." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night. That encounter shook Jim to his core. He wanted to believe Alan was just another conspiracy theorist, but part of him couldn't dismiss the fear in the man's eyes. The next day, Jim tried to trace him, calling every ministry office he could find, but there was no record of any Alan who fit that description. It was as if the man never existed. Jim began keeping his blinds closed, his doors locked, but even inside he didn't feel safe. At night, he'd wake to faint electrical buzzing, like static whispering through the walls. His radio turned on by itself, playing only white noise that sometimes seemed to shape itself into distorted voices. "We see you! We see you!" One night, his daughter screamed again. Jim ran into her room and froze. The air was freezing cold, his breath visible. Her toys were scattered on the floor, all facing the same direction, toward the window. Outside in the moonlight he saw a faint outline, tall, motionless, humanoid. It stood for several seconds, then faded, like a shadow swallowed by the mist. He ran outside barefoot, calling into the night, "Who are you? What do you want from us?" But no voice replied. Only the low hum returned, echoing from the distance, vibrating through his bones. Jim's wife begged him to stop digging deeper. "It's just a photo," she cried. "Let it go before it destroys us." But Jim couldn't. He felt a strange pull, like the photograph had bound him to something ancient and unseen. He started documenting everything: lights, sounds, movements, weather changes. He mapped it all out and discovered that every event aligned with magnetic field fluctuations, the kind caused by unknown energy sources. Someone or something was trying to communicate through the Earth itself. As his obsession grew, so did his isolation. Letters began arriving from people around the world, witnesses who claimed they had seen the same white figure. Some described them as watchers, others called them guardians. A few simply wrote, "Once you see them, they never let you go." Jim realized he was part of a pattern, not chosen, but marked. He was no longer just investigating an alien mystery. He was living it. That night, he sat by the photo once again, tracing the outline of the being with trembling fingers. "What are you?" he whispered into the dark. And in that heavy silence, his radio turned on by itself again. A distorted voice spoke, low and broken. "You took our picture." The voice from the radio haunted Jim for days. Every night it came back. Not in full sentences, just fragments of strange mechanical whispers. "We watched you or return the image." Each time the air grew heavier, and the electronics in his house flickered and died. Jim replaced radios, unplugged everything, even moved the photograph to a locked drawer. But no matter what he did, the voice always found a way back. It was as if the being in the photo wasn't just captured. It was trapped, aware, and angry. Jim decided to visit the site where the photo had been taken, alone. He arrived at the Solway marshes at dawn, mist curling over the ground like living smoke. The silence was eerie, too perfect, as though the entire world was holding its breath. He walked to the exact spot where his daughter had sat months ago. The grass was still flattened there, as if frozen in time. Suddenly his camera, which he'd brought just in case, began to hum. Not a normal vibration, but a deep resonant sound that vibrated through his fingertips. The lens started fogging, even though the air was cold. He looked up, and there it was again. A tall white figure stood across the marsh, motionless. This time it wasn't distant or blurry. Jim could see it clearly, its skin pale and metallic, its eyes black and reflective like glass. Its body shimmered, half solid, half translucent, as though it existed between two realities. Jim raised his camera, but before he could click, the figure raised its hand, not in threat, but as if signaling him to stop. Then the air around it distorted, warping like heat waves. The next second, the figure vanished, leaving only the faint smell of burnt ozone behind. Jim fell to his knees, shaking. He had seen it again. It was real. But why him? Why his family? When Jim returned home, his wife stared at him in horror. "Jim," she said softly, "where have you been?" He looked confused. "I was gone an hour," but her eyes filled with tears. "You've been missing for 2 days." Jim's mind went blank. 2 days? He checked his watch. It had stopped, frozen at the moment he saw the being. His camera was still warm, though he hadn't taken a single picture. The film roll was missing. It was as if someone had removed it while he wasn't aware. Later that night, Jim received a call. No number. Just static. A deep voice whispered, "Stop searching, or she will see us too." The line went dead. He rushed to his daughter's room and found her sleeping peacefully, clutching her toy camera. But drawn across her window, in the condensation, were 3 words written from the outside. "We were here." The next morning, strange men visited again, not in suits this time, but in military uniforms. They claimed to be from the Royal Air Force Intelligence Division. They said they needed the original photograph for national security reasons. Jim refused at first, but one of them leaned closer and said, "You don't understand what you photographed. It's not alien. It's interdimensional." His blood ran cold. The man continued, "You saw something you were never meant to see, something that crosses between timelines." The photo created a tear. "They're trying to close it." After they left, Jim sat in silence, his heart pounding. The word interdimensional echoed in his mind. Could that explain the missing time, the static, the voices? He looked outside, the sun setting over the marshes, painting the sky blood red. For a moment, he thought he saw a shimmer, like a faint outline of the figure again, just at the edge of the light. He blinked, and it was gone. That night, as he held his daughter close, he whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter what they are." But deep down, he knew. Something had already marked them. Something that didn't belong to this world or any other. The following days were a blur of fear and obsession. Jim could no longer tell the difference between dreams and reality. The moment he closed his eyes, he saw it. The white figure standing at the edge of his vision, unmoving, watching. His wife begged him to destroy the negatives, to burn everything related to that photo, but Jim couldn't bring himself to do it. "If I destroy the proof," he said, "they win. The truth dies with me." But the truth, it seemed, was already consuming him from the inside. He began documenting everything in a black notebook, every flicker of light, every unexplainable sound. One night, while flipping through his notes, he realized something chilling. Every sighting, every electrical disturbance, every appearance of the figure aligned with exact lunar phases. It wasn't random. The events followed a pattern, a cycle. The closer the moon got to its full phase, the stronger the energy became. He started calling it the window cycle, believing the being could only cross over during certain cosmic alignments. That theory would soon prove horrifyingly real. 3 nights before the next full moon, the activity spiked. His house lights flickered violently. The temperature dropped, and outside a strange fog rolled in, thick, glowing faintly blue. The air smelled metallic. His daughter's toys started moving on their own, gently spinning in circles. Then the radio came alive again, but this time the voice wasn't broken when it was clear. A deep, hollow tone echoed through the static. "We warned you. The door is open." Jim's wife screamed as the front door burst open, though no wind followed. The fog began seeping into the house. Jim grabbed his camera and ran outside, coughing, blinded by the mist. Shapes moved in it, tall, distorted, human-like, but not quite. He raised the camera and snapped 3 rapid photos. With each flash, the shapes shifted closer like they were reacting to the light. Then, a piercing sound filled the air. Not loud, but so high-pitched it drilled into his skull. He dropped the camera and fell to his knees, clutching his head. For a few seconds, time itself seemed to slow down. The fog folded inward and imploded silently, leaving behind total stillness. The world had gone quiet again. When Jim looked up, everything felt wrong. The stars were brighter, the marsh was gone, replaced by an endless dark plain that stretched for miles. He stumbled backward in panic, and realized he wasn't in Cumbria anymore. The sky shimmered with strange lights moving in perfect symmetry, like living constellations. His breathing quickened, his vision blurred. And then, the white figure appeared again, standing just a few feet away. This time it spoke. Its voice wasn't from a mouth, but inside his head. "You wanted to see the truth. Now you'll never unsee it." A blinding white light surrounded him. He felt weightless, pulled upward. He tried to scream but couldn't. Then darkness. The next thing he remembered was waking up in his bed, trembling, drenched in sweat. His wife stared at him like she'd seen a ghost. "Jim, where were you?" He sat up, dazed. I don't know." She pointed at the clock. 2 days had passed again. His camera was on the table, untouched, yet warm to the touch. When he developed the film, his hands went numb. The photos showed not 1, but 3 white figures, standing side by side, facing him. That night, Jim understood something terrifying. This wasn't an accident. He hadn't stumbled upon them by chance. He had been chosen. The being in his first photo was never posing behind his daughter. It was watching him. By now, fear had become part of Jim's every breath. The photo, the fog, the missing days, they had fractured his reality. He began seeing symbols carved into the dirt near his house, circles intersected by lines, drawn with precision no human hand could manage. Each night, he'd erase them, and each morning they would return, glowing faintly under the dawn light. His wife grew distant, whispering to her mother that Jim was losing his mind. But deep down she too felt the presence, that invisible heaviness in the air that made even the birds stop singing. Desperate for answers, Jim drove to London to meet with a private researcher named Dr. Robert Hale, a man rumored to have worked on classified aerial phenomena for the British government. When Jim showed him the photo, Hale went pale. "I've seen this before," he muttered. He opened a dusty file labeled Project Silent Sky. Inside were black and white photos, different locations, different years. But every image had one thing in common: a tall, white figure in the background. "These sightings," Hale explained, "aren't extraterrestrial in the traditional sense. They're temporal anomalies, visitors from another layer of existence, a reality slightly out of sync with ours. Your camera? It caught a moment when the two worlds overlapped." Jim was speechless. Hale continued, "Once the boundary is broken, it can't be closed easily. They'll keep appearing until balance is restored, or until the witness is removed." His voice dropped. "They don't like being seen." Before Jim could ask what that meant, Hale looked out the window, his face drained of color. "They're here," he whispered. Jim turned to see a car parked outside, 2 dark figures inside staring up at them. "Run," Hale said. But before Jim could react, the lights in the room flickered, and the sound of static filled the air. The glass of the window began vibrating, humming at an unnatural pitch. Then, darkness. When Jim awoke, he was lying in his car on the side of a highway, alone. The sky was dawn gray and his clothes were damp. Hale was gone. No trace of the meeting, No files, no documents. It was as if the man had been erased. Jim's head throbbed, his ears ringing with a sound that felt like electricity. He looked at his reflection in the car mirror and froze. Behind his shoulder, faintly reflected in the glass, stood the white figure again. He spun around and nothing, just empty air. Returning home, he found his wife pale and shaking. "Jim," she whispered, "a man came by while you were gone. He said he was your friend from London. He told me to give you this." She handed him an envelope, plain and unmarked. Inside was a small strip of microfilm, and a single piece of paper with one line written in shaky handwriting. "Project Silent Sky is real. Don't let them erase you." That night, Jim locked himself in his study and used an old viewer to examine the microfilm. What he saw made his blood run cold. Photos of unknown aircraft hovering above classified test sites, men in dark suits retrieving debris that shimmered like liquid light. And finally, a document labeled Subject T01, Templeton James, exposure level, irreversible. He dropped the film. They knew about him long before the photo went public. He wasn't just a random witness. He was part of an experiment. He realized the so-called men in black weren't visitors. They were controllers, cleaning up after every crossing. The photo hadn't just captured a being. It had captured a breach in reality. As midnight struck, Jim sat by his window, staring into the dark. The marsh glowed faintly in the distance, blue, calm, and unnatural. The hum returned, low and steady, and through the glass reflected behind him, the figure appeared once again. This time it wasn't watching. It was smiling. The next morning, Jim woke with a start, gasping for air. His body trembled, drenched in cold sweat, and his head throbbed like something was trying to claw its way out of his mind. He stumbled to the mirror and froze. 3 small, perfectly circular marks glowed faintly behind his right ear. They pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, leaving a faint blue hue beneath his skin. He tried scrubbing them, but they wouldn't fade. His wife watched in terror, begging him to see a doctor. But Jim already knew. This wasn't medical. It was a mark, a sign he'd been touched by whatever lived between those dimensions. That day, everything around him began to malfunction. Clock stopped at 3:11 a.m., the same time he'd heard the last voice through the radio. The TV flickered to static whenever the news mentioned space or satellites. Even his dog refused to enter the living room, growling at thin air. Jim's daughter, innocent and unaware of the growing horror, started drawing pictures of the white friends, showing tall figures with glowing eyes standing beside her father. When Jim asked where she saw them, she pointed to the window and said softly, "They're here when you sleep." That single sentence shattered whatever calm he had left. Determined to end the nightmare, Jim decided to destroy everything connected to the photograph. Negatives, prints, notes, the camera itself. He built a small fire in the backyard and began throwing it all in. But the moment the flames touched the photo, the air around him turned icy. The fire flickered blue, then extinguished completely, as if smothered by invisible hands. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Suddenly the ground beneath his feet vibrated, and he heard the hum again, deeper, angrier this time. He looked up, and the sky was moving. Not the clouds, the sky itself. A massive, translucent shape shimmered above the marshes, its edges bending the stars. It wasn't a ship. It was something alive. The hum grew louder, shaking the windows, rattling his bones. His wife screamed for him to come inside, but Jim couldn't move. The enormous shape above twisted slowly, and from its center descended 3 beams of light, pure white, silent, and impossibly precise. They stopped just inches from the ground, illuminating the same spot where the original photo had been taken. Within the beams, the outlines of the white figures appeared, faint at first, then solidifying. One of them raised its arm again, just like before, signaling him to stop. But this time Jim didn't listen. He stepped forward. As he crossed into the edge of the light, a force gripped him. Not painful, but heavy, like gravity itself had shifted. His vision blurred. He saw fragments, cities collapsing, stars dying, time reversing in loops. Voices filled his head, thousands speaking at once, saying one word, "Return!" He screamed, trying to pull away, but the light held him. His wife's voice called his name in the distance, faint and desperate. Then, everything went black. Hours later, the neighbors found Jim lying in the marsh, unconscious but alive. His camera was beside him, shattered, its lens melted. When he awoke, he didn't remember how he got there. The marks behind his ear had disappeared, leaving behind faint scars shaped like triangles. But his eyes? They weren't the same. His once blue irises now shimmered faintly white under certain light, as though reflecting something unseen. He didn't tell anyone what he saw in the beam, not even his wife. But from that day forward, Jim Templeton was no longer the same man. He spoke little, ate little, and sometimes at night, he would walk outside barefoot, stare at the stars, and whisper, "They showed me what comes next." The Solway Firth mystery had changed him forever, and whatever he had seen that night had followed him back. After that night, the atmosphere around Jim's home grew heavier, a suffocating stillness that seemed to cling to every corner. The air itself felt electric, charged with something unseen. His wife moved out with their daughter, fearing for their safety, leaving Jim alone in that silent house by the marsh. The townsfolk whispered that he'd gone insane, that he'd conjured the entire story to escape the monotony of small-town life. But those who dared visit him knew otherwise. They spoke of strange lights flickering from his windows at odd hours, and a deep humming sound that seemed to vibrate from beneath the ground whenever he was near. Jim began receiving letters again, but these were different. They had no postage, no handwriting. Instead, symbols, geometric patterns, spirals, circles intersecting like orbital maps, printed in faint silver ink. They glowed under the moonlight but vanished in the sun. He pinned them on the walls of his study, connecting them with red strings, trying to decipher the message. The more he stared, the clearer it became. The shapes weren't random. They formed a star map, one that didn't match any known constellation. It pointed somewhere beyond the visible universe. He realized the being had left him clues, but for what purpose he couldn't yet understand. Then came the dreams, vivid, more real than waking life. Jim found himself floating above Earth, watching strange silver objects orbiting silently just beyond the clouds. He heard voices, calm, melodic, echoing from all directions. "You opened the gate. Now they cross freely." Each time he woke, his body ached, and his nose bled faintly, as if he'd been exposed to radiation. He tried recording these dreams, whispering into a tape recorder every detail, but when he played them back, only static and faint whispers remained. Voices not his own, speaking in an unknown language. Determined to make sense of it all, Jim returned once more to the Solway Firth marshes. But what awaited him there made his blood run cold. The grass was scorched in a perfect circle nearly 30 feet wide, and at its center lay a metallic residue, thin, shimmering like liquid mercury. When he touched it, his fingertips burned. Yet moments later, the pain was gone, replaced by an overwhelming feeling of weightlessness, as if gravity itself had flickered off for a split second. His surroundings shifted slightly, the world bending at the edges, and for a moment he saw them again. Tall silhouettes in the mist, dozens of them this time, standing silently, watching him. Then the vision snapped back, and he was alone once more. Back home, Jim developed the small sample of the residue under magnification. What he saw defied every law of science. Microscopic geometric crystals forming patterns too perfect to be natural, constantly rearranging themselves. It was as if the material was alive. He sent a sample to a trusted contact at the university, but days later, that contact vanished without a trace. The laboratory was found abandoned, every file deleted, every hard drive melted. Only one message remained on Jim's answering machine, recorded at 2:17 a.m. They don't want it studied. That night, the hum returned, louder than ever. The lights flickered and every window in the house began vibrating in unison. Jim ran outside, shouting into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The marsh answered with silence. Then faintly from above, the same deep voice echoed through the still air. "You brought them here." The realization hit him like ice. Whatever the Solway beings were, whatever realm they came from, their gate had opened through him, and now they were no longer watching from afar. They were crossing. For weeks, Jim disappeared from the public eye. His neighbors said they sometimes heard screams echoing through the empty fields at night, mixed with a strange mechanical hum that seemed to come from beneath the ground. The police investigated once, only once. They found his front door ajar, his equipment scattered, and pages of his notes filled with strange coordinates and equations. Written repeatedly on one wall, in thick black marker, were the words, "They're inside the light." No one dared to erase it. When his brother, David, finally visited, he found Jim sitting in his study, pale, unshaven, and staring blankly at a wall of photographs. His eyes were hollow, and he barely reacted when spoken to. But when David mentioned the Solway photograph, Jim's head snapped up. He whispered, "They've shown me what's coming. It's not invasion. It's replacement." David didn't understand. Jim explained that the beings weren't here to destroy, they were here to copy. To study humans so perfectly that soon no one would know who was real and who wasn't. Every person replaced left behind a faint, static hum, a trace vibration detectable only in absolute silence. Later that evening, David went through Jim's notes, horrified by what he saw. There were lists of names, people from their small town who'd gone missing over the years. Next to each name was a date, a strange frequency reading, and a small sketch of a circle divided into 3 parts, the same shape that appeared in the silver letters. At the bottom of the list was one final entry. David, pending. He froze, staring at it, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Slowly he turned toward his brother. But Jim wasn't looking at him anymore. Jim was staring through him, his pupils reflecting faint rings of light. Panicking, David stumbled outside, only to find the night air thick with a metallic smell. The entire horizon shimmered faintly, like heat mirage, except it was cold, unnaturally so. In the distance, the marsh glowed again, not white this time, but deep blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. David could see shapes within it, tall, translucent beings, moving in synchronization. The sound returned, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to speak directly to his bones. Then he saw another Jim emerging from the blue light, expressionless, eyes glowing faintly. David's mind went blank. The real Jim, or the one he thought was real, whispered behind him, "It's already begun." Within seconds, the lights expanded, engulfing the entire marsh, spilling over the fields. The birds fell silent, the wind stopped, and everything was drenched in an eerie luminescence. When the light finally receded, both Jims were gone, and only the empty house remained. The next morning, the authorities sealed off the entire area, calling it a radiation hazard. But locals still claim that on quiet nights the hum can be heard, a low, constant vibration that makes glass tremble and hearts race, and if you ever drive past Solway Firth late at night, some say you can still see a man standing by the marsh, camera in hand, staring at the sky waiting for the flash that started it all. Years later, the Solway Firth case became one of the most debated mysteries in history. Skeptics dismissed it as photographic error, a trick of light, or simple coincidence. But those who lived near the marsh never accepted that explanation. They spoke of strange blue lights returning every few months, always in the same place, always at the same time. 3:33 a.m. Those who dared to investigate never stayed long. Their electronics malfunctioned. Compasses spun wildly, and a low hum filled the air, deep enough to be felt in the chest, like a second heartbeat. Some reported hearing whispers. Others claimed to see glowing figures standing motionless at the edge of the water, as if waiting for something. Or someone. In 1987, a young journalist reopened Jim Templeton's old case files. Inside the dusty box, he found undeveloped film rolls, the ones marked, "Do Not Touch." When developed, they showed something no one expected, dozens of images of the same field, the same marsh. But this time, there were 3 figures standing there, all tall, all silver, all looking directly into the camera. The final photograph was different. It showed the inside of Jim's house, with the same 3 figures standing around his chair. And in the reflection of the window, Jim's terrified face was visible, looking straight at them. The journalist vanished 2 days later, his car found abandoned near the marsh, headlights still on, radio whispering static that never stopped. Over time, the Solway area became forbidden land. Official signs warned of unstable ground and chemical hazards, but locals knew it was something else, something far older, far deeper. The government built a tall fence, but it didn't stop the lights. Each year, around the date of the original photograph, a pulse of light rises from the marsh and vanishes into the sky. No one knows where it goes. Some believe it's a message, a signal calling others. Others say it's a doorway reopening. Whatever it is, it always comes back. And sometimes, a camera goes off. No one presses the button, but the flash appears, followed by silence. Those who've seen it describe a momentary feeling of being watched, as if a presence stands right behind them. One survivor, trembling, once said, "It's not that they come for us, it's that they never left." And with that, the Solway Firth became more than a mystery. It became a warning, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, we were never alone to begin with. As you sit there now, in the quiet of your room, think about this. What if they're watching us the same way we study ants? What if one day the flash you see in the sky isn't lightning, but someone taking a picture of you? If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe, because the truth isn't hidden. It's waiting, and next time, the mystery we uncover might just be your story. Until then, keep your lights on, keep your eyes open.